I'm going to start today's webinar. Thank you everybody for joining. Good evening, welcome. Thank you for joining to this webinar. This will be about bridging the gap between theory and practice in project and program management. My name is Lili Makranci, and I am a volunteer at local business and community team at PMI Saudi Arabia chapter. I am going to be your host today. It's my very big pleasure to have with us Dr. Ibrahim Shira today as the speaker. Dr. Ibrahim Shira is Chief Executive of Business Planning at the Quality of Life Program Center. For the next couple of seconds or minutes, I am going to be introducing Dr. Ibrahim briefly. He started his career as an engineer, but quickly he have moved to the project management field and became a project manager, a program manager, a PMO manager, and a P3O director for more than 15 years. After that, he took a series of leadership positions in business development, commercial and financial modeling, and consultation in operations and governance. Additionally to all these, he has established many business firms and supported many entrepreneurs as well. Additionally, he is a board member in a startup company which is called Ability.co, specialized in emerging technologies. Dr. Ibrahim holds 4 academic degrees and more than 44 professional certificates. He is certified PPP professional and one of the early founders of the National Center for Privatization and PPP in Saudi Arabia. He has more than 21 years of experience in many fields, such as defense, security, healthcare, agriculture, transportation, privatization, technology, and retail. So, as you could see, he has a very, very wide professional experience, and we are very lucky to hear Dr. Ibrahim about bridging the gap between theory and practice in project management today. As I have mentioned you previously, this will be a very actual topic in our century because everybody is facing changes. Now, let me give the word to Dr. Ibrahim. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lily. It is really an honor and a pleasure to be here today and introduce this very important, or better yet, is a significant subject that everyone is talking about right now. It's basically bridging the gap between theory and practice in the field of project and program management. In the field of project and program management, we had many ideas, thoughts, standards across the different countries. Different countries used to manage their projects and programs and everything that they are executing in terms of tasks and whatsoever in different way. The idea is to have them successfully delivered as per the original plan. Throughout my 22 years of experience, I haven't seen a plan ended up executed as it's initiated in the beginning, meaning that you don't know what might happen to you in the future. Also, people used to embrace standards and practices from the books, from textbooks, from institutions like PMI, like any other institutions that teaches special number of processes that if used properly, the projects and programs supposed to be delivered as planned, at least to a certain extent. And the project manager and the program manager would be fully aware of what standards and processes he's using, and would escalate his experience and uplift his way of doing projects. Now, the key word is project. The key word in all what we are doing is projects. Whether you want to call projects giga projects, small projects, or whatever you want to name them or define them as per, for example, PMI, definition of having a unique certain of activities, start and end, and so forth, as it's defined in the BIM book. But at the end, this gap, I call this gap always is the culture or the unknown aspects of that would bond or that would really link the theory with the practice. It is important to understand this gap. It's important to understand how to communicate the practice to the theory and vice versa. By understanding exactly the contribution of the theory into the practice and the practice into the theory. In this presentation, this session, there are many statistics that's really interesting to know about the field of project and program management. When we know that at least more than half of companies or organizations statistically understand the value of the project management. So they understand that project management is really a necessary subject, a necessary field that if used properly, it will create value for the company or the organization. So this buy-in already, more than 50% of these organizations, according to statistics conducted by PMI in different aspects, they embrace or they understand that there is a value for project management. And we know, according to a statistical also research that's been done in 2018, that around 70% of projects met their original goals or business intent, which is the key. As you can see, these numbers or percentages have not communicated how you are close to plan or how you're good in terms of scope or time or whatever constraints you put for yourself to deliver the project. But it talks about the original goals of the projects. It talks about the intention of the businesses when the projects was launched and initiated. And basically, if you, according to these statistics, say that 60% of the projects were completed within the original budgets, that gives you an idea that there are more. It's not easy number just to neglect. It is more than 50% of the surveyed companies or organizations say that 60% of their projects were completed as per the original budget. Means that this is a perception. It doesn't mean that they were not being over budgeted, but in some time of the execution. But at least to their perceptions that more or less the 60% of these projects were completed as per the original budget. Interestingly enough, when we know that 23% of organizations use standards project management, meaning that there's around more than 75% of these organizations actually don't like to use these kind of standards. Why? Because it might, their perception, their understanding of those standards might be a bottleneck or might be a redundancy in the system. See, when it comes to project management practices or program management practices, we're talking about an integral part of organizations' operation management. In the organization, you have a business process across all functions of the organization, and it's an operating model that's connected to each other. When you come up with a standard that, according to you, it would help in delivering the projects that you are executing or delivering the benefits of the programs that you are trying to execute, it needs sometimes to have it culturally adapted by the leadership of the organization, and at the same time by the people who's really managing these projects or really executing those projects, whether those were resources, vendors, or even stakeholders that had really contribution to how the project is supposed to be executed. And also, when you surf enough and you see what other statistics out there, you keep hearing about project failures or program failures. So you could find reasons why these projects fail, And some of those reasons that been captured is that the objectives of the organizations has changed, or there were no strategical alignment between the projects that's executed and the organizations that's really launching this project, or maybe the leadership or the data gathered were not accurate enough or not as per the requirement. So they were misleading in the data or the information that were gathered. Uh, of course, communication is the key, and we will talk about the communication. Communication, to me, project management or task management, or program management, or portfolio management, it's about communication and it's about reporting. So it's 50% communication, 50% reporting. And you could cluster whatever aspects or knowledge areas under these two pillars, which are very important skills that the project manager, program manager, and portfolio manager need to be aware of, because basically he's communicating with his team, he's communicating outside, and he's communicating throughout the projects and throughout the program, throughout the portfolio. So the lack of understanding of project standards, you might have the standards of how to manage the project, but you might apply them in the wrong way. That is why we say that there is a gap between theory and practice. However, some of these standards were based or were laid on based on certain practices and experiences from other industries. Like, for example, you might use a template or you might use a standard that's used in oil and gas industry, and you want to apply them in construction industry. And it's part of practices that have been communicated or promoted through institutions that are well known to everyone when it comes to the legacy of and experience in project management. And this is where the problems occur. Also, it depends on the background and experience and knowledge and education of the people who's learning about project management and trying to understanding the standards and how to apply them. So learning certain areas in project management, program management, portfolio management is one thing. Applying them to real work is another thing. We need to make sure that we have every tools possible to deploy what we've just learned in a right way. You don't have to deploy everything, you don't have to utilize everything, but at least if you could apply some of the things you've learned, that would make a change, and that would make a change to your organization, make a change to yourself and the practices of how to manage projects. This is very important to be embraced by individuals. This is a very important concept, and I would like to share this concept with you, which is the white elephant. The white elephant, it's a very interesting story. It's the king of Siam, which is Thailand today. He used to give gifts to whoever he disliked, and this gift is basically the white elephant. Why? By the way, white elephant is rarely you can find a white elephant, but the white elephant, its features, what do we call it? It's rarely find species, make them very valuable. However, it needs a lot of maintenance. It needs a lot of size, a big size to put them in, and it's need a lot of cost. So you will embed a lot of cost to take care of something that it's useless. So it is a sign from the king of Siam that this white elephant, which is an asset, when he give it to someone, he's giving him basically a burden, and he's giving him some things to utilize or maintain, which is not going to add any value to him. What is the similarity between this and the projects we are doing and the programs we are doing? If we created and deliver a project that has no value whatsoever and no benefits, added benefits to the organization we are working on, as per the justification we put in place earlier in the project initiation phase, you will end up having a white elephant. So it's a white elephant, meaning that you're going to end up having something that you need to maintain, but it's not going to give you any returns, it's not going to give you any benefits. So at the end, you would end up having a useless asset that would give you no benefits or objective realization whatsoever. And we can see that. We can see in the planning especially when it comes to cities and you plan cities. You see sometimes in the transportation that you put a road or you to put a street somewhere that it's really not solving the congestion when it comes to traffic congestion or coming to mobility issues or whatsoever. And we have a real example. For example, if you want to travel from Riyadh to Dammam using a train, and you want to travel from Riyadh to Qassim using a train, the two stations are not close to each other. So you need to change mode of transport to go from one station to another, which basically signify that there is a poor planning when it comes to the integration mode of transport. And this might become a white elephant for some of the stations that you've created, but not giving you the benefits that you think that it's going to give you. This could also apply to airports, so infrastructure. So white elephants cost a lot of money to government and to organizations. And we need to always make sure that whatever we are doing is really going to add value. Because I keep hearing project managers saying that my mandate is to make sure that I'm delivering the projects as per the scope, as per the time, as per the cost. But he needs or she needs to expand their thoughts and their maturity to know that there is a value for delivering such a project like this for her organization or his organization. I'm going to move to one more thing, which is very important. In every organization, there is many disciplines in business that you could summarize and could understand the whole idea from one page, from one slide. Like, for example, if you want to explain strategy, you go to use Porter's 5 forces, for example. This is Michael Porter. He invented this layout, as you can see. By using this layout, by identifying those layouts, you can clearly talk about your strategy freely, and you could address them in a very prescriptive way. People will understand what you do, why you're doing it, and how you're going to do it, and when are you expected to be successful, just only from one piece of paper, which is basically explaining what is the industry you are working on, what are the threats of substituting whatever product that you are producing, what are the entrance or the threat of entrance, just to address the right market that you want to market your products or services and introduce them. Also, you want to see how powerful your buyers or suppliers are within your industry. So if I have a strategy, it's easy for me to explain my strategy using this layout of Michael Porter, especially when it comes to for-profit organizations. And even in the government, we can use this, but we can do some tweaks and adjustments in some of those dimensions and angles. Similarly, if you want to do a business model, we can understand that there is a business model canvas. Business model canvas, you can, if you fill all these fields, you can easily explain what your business and how it's operated, who's your partners. So you can, because this is basically tells you what services and products I'm selling, how much is it cost me to build this product or build this service, and what revenues I'm expecting out of these services. So if you want to tell a story, let's go back. So what products, what things that I'm trying to do, what activities I'm trying to do, how much they're going to cost me if I'm going to do them using these resources and by doing these partners. And what am I expecting as revenue from these products and services I'm going to do? And what are the value propositions that would really attract the customers to buy my product or services? Then my relationship to the customers, the channels of marketing, and who my customer is. So this whole canvas will give me an idea of what kind of business model I have, and based on that, you can build your organization. And trust me, many organizations use this. It's a very simple way, very simple reference way to go back to understand the business you are running right now. The reason I'm saying that is that either Porter or Business Model Canvas can give you a summarized view of what you are doing. Unlike project and program management and portfolio management, you have to look into many aspects of the project, so that you need to have more than one slide. And what makes sometimes it is difficult for project managers and so forth, and program managers, to really capture every single piece of the equation into one picture and see the overall picture. Now, also, similarly, when you go to the marketing, they have the 7Ps marketing mix, which is the price, the promotion, the physical evidence, people, product, process, place. So the marketeers already, again, they developed a model or one piece or one sheet by which they could understand their strategy of doing marketing strategy, to do the pricing, to do the place where they're supposed to market their product and services, and so forth. And this is another helpful tool to simplify what do we need to achieve out of this project management or program management practices that we want to do, from theory to practice. It is really important to understand, if we go back to this slide, that this is basically, which is the gap, is understanding how the culture going to adapt whatever practices you are bringing to the organization, or whatever theories you are bringing to the organization. Those two need to communicate. In order to communicate, they need to understand each other. They need to understand what benefits and value you are creating, so that they know that if they completed the bridge, they can cross the bridge in a safely manner. So going back, we know the 7 P's of marketing, which is price, motion, physical evidence, people, product, process, places. And as you can see, the projects would end up, which will be ending up in a product that you're going to introduce or service you're going to introduce in your company or your organization. You will adapt operation management. So you will integrate whatever operations or processes you've created to execute or to deliver projects into the what we call the skeleton of the process and the operating model of the organization you are in. I have a quick question, which is a very interesting question. I'm going to talk a little bit about the BIM book, not in detail, but in a helicopter view, just to give you a glimpse in terms of the data and information captured in this book, which is very interesting, because I've been watching the progress of the BIM book since 1994. But the question is, when was the first edition BIM book published? Is it 1994? Is it 1996? Is it 1990? Or is it 1969? You can use the Q&As to answer this question. It is just only for you to understand each dates of those dates are more important, and we will talk about them maybe in the next slide. So let me give you like maybe 20 seconds or maybe 1 minute just to answer this. You don't need to go to Google. I just want you, there's no, it's not the PMP question. It's just I want to know how you guys visualizing this. What do you see? What do you think? What do you know about these days? By the way, each date of those dates has a meaning. And I'm going to explain the meaning, and has an achievement in PMI, or PM book in particular. So I see 94, 96, 69, 96. Any more answers? Anyone is interested to know? Even if you want to guess, there is no problem to guess, because it's better for us to understand how old or how new the BIM book is when it comes to publishing. I'm going to give like maybe 30 more seconds, and I'm going to answer. If you are interested, just give me an answer to this question. So 99, 69, 94. I see all the answers there. It is not untypical to for some not knowing exactly the dates of publishing the first BIM book. So the answer is I'm going to end up this and continue talking. So basically, in 1994, BIM book was the first draft of BIM book was issued, and in 1996 is the first edition of BIM book published. 1969, for your information, it was the date that the PMI was established. So people gathered, met with each other, and talked with each other, and thought about having an organization, an institute that would embrace and communicate the knowledge of project management across United States. And then from there, they went outside the United States. The next slide is really interesting. And here is what I want to tell you about this next slide. Can you observe 1996, the first edition of the PIM book? How many pages was the PIM book? It was only 180 pages. Compared to the sixth edition, which is 980 pages, you can compare easily and can say it easy. That is, it becomes more complex to manage a project or to manage a program or so forth. So you have the agile concept, you have the risk management becomes a certificate by itself. You talk about stakeholder, you see evolving. So someone who took the PMP and was certified in 1996 compared to someone who took the PMP and got certification in 2017 or 18. How can we compare both if the one who studied for the 180, he studied only 37 processes and 9 knowledge areas compared to someone who studied more than around 49 processes and 10 knowledge areas and so forth. Someone could argue with me saying that, Ibrahim, projects has changed. The way of doing projects has changed since 1996. Well, there are some principles. I'm from the few people who had taken the PMP in 1999, 2000. Back then, we used to manage projects using the framework, the well-known framework, which is initiation, planning, execution, monitoring, control, and closing. And surprisingly enough, still, if you talk about the framework of how to manage projects, you'll still hear people talking about the same process, which is initiation, planning, monitoring, control, execution, monitoring, control, closing. And you still finding people talking about deliverables, outputs, capabilities, which I think we need to think differently, because according to Gartner, in 10 years time frame, around 70% of the project management jobs going to be automated using AI, which is really interesting statistics and will threaten a number of jobs across the project management value chain. Because basically, it's, as I just said earlier, it's reporting and communication. When you do communicating, or you communicate with stakeholders, you communicate just to make sure that you are on track, on plan, as per the budget and so forth. When you do reporting, you can use any APM tools, you can use any EMI, project management information system, PMIS, just to reflect or do the dashboard for you to report them to the decision maker, so that you can improve the decision making process across the organization and the sponsorship and so forth. Bear in mind that everything evolves. So you need, as project manager, you need to evolve. You need to utilize the new disciplines of project management, and you need to focus on the project. But how to focus on the projects, which is very important. I'm going to give you some examples, which I think some of you might know this example, but it's a very interesting example. When the Sydney Opera House was planned to be built, It was scheduled for 4 years and budgeted for $7 million. But it finished in 14 years and it costed more than around 102 million US dollars. You can see the deviation and the cost overrun. You can see the schedule overrun. You can see many things happen just from a simple asset, or might be a poor planning for such a project like that. But let me ask a very legitimate question out of this case study. How many days does this asset have been utilized since in 1 year, since the day it was inaugurated? So let me rephrase the question. So you build this asset to be utilized by event organizers to do opera in this house, and you ended up, your original plan is to have it at least utilize 50% of the days in 1 year, which is around 150 or 170 days in 1 year. But what if you finish this project after 14 years and after it's costed you 102 million US dollars, and you just use it for only 10 or 20 days in this whole year for the purpose that was created? Would you consider this as a successful project or a failure project? Apart from the cost overrun, apart from the schedule, the slippage in the schedule, we still haven't realized the benefits of this project. So I think the value that you need to be sure it's created out of the projects that you are managing is very important to be addressed while you are executing the project. So this is one example, which is international example of how you could have the best planners of the best, and you ended up having the projects executed in a very prolonged time, and it cost you a lot of money. Luckily, I used to be the contract manager of this project, which is the operation for the passenger and the freight services for the Saudi Railway Company, which is a big project. It's around 1 billion Saudi riyal, and it's an operation and maintenance project. It's an operation and maintenance project that you're supposed to manage a consortium from a UK consortium to ensure that you are meeting certain targets and objectives for each of those two line of businesses. When it comes to freight, you're talking about tonnages, how many tonnages you are trying to transport from one place to another place according to a timetable, approved timetable. When it comes to passenger, you're talking about the ridership and certain KPIs you're supposed to set forth, and you are managing these projects using, let me just again saying it from a different perspective, using the standards processes identified in the PIN book. How am I supposed to market or to embrace or to use those standards I've learned throughout the PIN book and throughout the training I've been through, and have them embedded within the business model or the operating model of the Saudi Railway Company to ensure the right delivery of the objectives and benefits that we want to achieve, and to ensure avoiding of any risks or trying to mitigate any risks or avoiding any or trying to solve any issues there. It was really a tough decision. We've saved around 100 million Saudi riyal throughout the execution the first 3 years, and we've reached somehow to performances that we were planning to reach, at least to some extent. However, the challenging part was how to make sure that this organization, the culture of the organization, was ready to adopt the standards of the project management practices, and how am I supposed to communicate those standards and processes to have them integrated throughout this organization. It was very interesting enough that I got the buy-in from the top management through and moving down to the organization and into its functions until they adopt and the standardization of how to make sure that the project is executed as per the templates we've created and tailored for this situation. And it's a operation and maintenance contract, which is very interesting, because at the beginning of this contract, we struggled because everyone came from different industry. People came from SABIC, other came from electronics industry, from defense, from security, from oil and gas, and everyone thought at that time that he has the best of the best standards and practices, and he want to force them into this contract. However, this contract was managed in a very different way, using different disciplines of practices, and we complementing them with the right standards used by PMI and APMG, and we ended up having the right benefits realization in the first year and the year after and the year after. And we make it an integral part of the organization strategy, which is very, very important to understand that. Another case study I was working on is to build a new industry called hobby groups or hobby clubs in the quality of life organization. So we started from strategy to legislatives to regulatory and until the operation. We are in this phase, we are in the operation now. But in order to do that, how am I supposed to apply the PMBOK standards and templates and processes throughout these stages and phases? Given that we have different, we have consultation, some consultation work here, some IT work here, some legal work here, and every aspect of these projects has its different personality. We need to understand them fully so that we wouldn't make ourselves as bottleneck for the process to move forward into this direction, which is very important because of the nature of the projects. So we need to understand the nature so we can close the gap. So constraints. We know each project manager work within these constraints, work within scope, cost, time, and of course, to understand that those are functions of each other, you need to maintain this triangle, which is equal basic triangle. You need to make sure that each of these are maintained and overseen throughout the execution of the project. And if we just limit ourselves to these triple constraints, I think we would never reach out to the maturity level that we're supposed to reach out when it comes to executing or delivering a project. It is very important actually to make sure that the project manager is aware of the value created out of this project. Some other people, they tailor the triple constraint, they add more constraint, like the stakeholder satisfaction. It's like other constraints. So it is a big room to add more constraint to whatever project you have, but at least PMI and PMBOK is saying to you that at least those three variables need to be baselined by the time you launch the project, because you want to measure the performance of the project and the performance of the project managers once those were once the project is launched based on those constraints. However, from the literature, I came across a presentation that was given by one of my closest friends, that he's saying that it's important to consider three constraints, three aspects of triple constraints, which is, I called it the value triple constraint. The value triple constraint. You need to make sure that you have the quality, the benefits, the engagement as the three constraints. And each one of those has what do we call it, a branch constraints, or sub constraints like the scope, time, and cost, which is the deliverables, operational. We need to make sure those are maintained all the way until we hand over the project and close the contract and the projects. But again, we need to have value for whatever we are delivering as projects or as a program. Meaning that I know I'm cleaning or building this building or this school for the benefits of the society. So I know what the value is of what I'm doing, which is giving you some push and some drivers of why you are doing this. Again, the threats, I have to make sure that the risks and threats there are managed well, And again, to make the projects sustainable is what I'm thinking it is. And you want to make sure that at the end, you have a product or you have a service that's going to be continuously produced and people using it. Like the mobile phone, you could create a prototype, but eventually you will end up understanding that your projects will add benefit to society. You'll add benefit to your organization that you are working for. And last triple constraint that I see its value for, and it's quoted from Mr. Antonio Rodriguez, is the engagement. You need to have people with passion. You need to have dedication. You need to have a purpose of what you are doing. So the engagement of how you deliver the project is very, very important. So do not limit yourself with only the constraints mentioned in the BIM book, but you need to make sure that your organization is resilient enough, agile enough to adopt different constraints just for the sake of the project that you are trying to deliver. If you have multiple projects that's depending on each other just to deliver certain benefits, then you're talking about the program in specific. But do not neglect the fact that you are doing something for purpose. You're doing something with passion. You are doing this with full engagement. You want to do this because you want to realize the benefits out of this. You don't want just to have this as a projects and technical outputs, the capabilities, the things that you just want to deliver just for the sake of the contract you are executing. No, that's not going to build your maturity and build your capability. You need to take the extra mile to know why you are doing this and to understand that. And that is why the project manager is supposed to be engaged from the early stages of the development of the projects and why the project is supposed to be delivered. I've came across a concept I've been working on for the last 1 year is to just copy the idea of having everything in one page, which is, I called it the 7 R's of the portfolio project canvas. This is what I call it. The 7 R's, I created this. It's only one page to give you an idea and to give you some decision-making capabilities and reasons where the project is in terms of dashboard. So going from down to up, going from this direction, I'm going to explain this model I'm working on in a very simple way, going from bottom to top. The board has reasons. The people who just have this projects identified has reasons why they want this project executed. So the idea is why. Why do we want the project to be executed? And it is really healthy to have this why and reasons always there when it comes to the review of the project card, which is this one, is the canvas that I'm working to develop here, and to remind them always why the project is really identified and really inaugurated and initiated in the first place. So the reason, between the reasons and the results over here, between the reasons and the results, you have 4 main pillars that you need to put your eyes on throughout the execution. So you need to know the requirements. And in the requirements, I always refer to the model Moscow. You can have any other models you want to use. Moscow is basically an abbreviation or acronym of must, should, could, and would. What things that you must have as requirements? What should you have as requirements? What could you have as requirements? What would you like to have as requirements? So when you have those here, basically people when they do the charter or we do any project charter, they would do whatever it's in the scope and whatever it's not in the scope, and they're trying to segregate between them. What I want to address really is the requirements, which is basically what do I'm planning to deliver at the end of this project. And I think that this model, which is Moscow model, it's a very good way to address these requirements between the client and the supplier. Even internally inside the organization, you could also communicate and entertain and render those requirements as per how the requester wants his end product or end service to look like. When it comes to resources, this is the second pillar, which is the resources. I think the resources, the importance of the resources is basically we're talking about the triple constraints. And we talked about the value constraints, which are what we said, you want to create value. Value is supposed to be the function, scope, and capability. And I want to quote one of the scholars. I like his quote in his book, which is "Don't park your brain outside," which is the Francis Hartman. He says, the only truly effective benchmark for project success is the long-term return gained on the investment in this project. So basically, he's saying in an indirect way, you need to make sure that every resources that you are using in this organization, whether those resources are people, tools, processes, assets, those would have a return on whatever you're going to invest them in. Not only waste them on the project without understanding the return that's going to come back to this resource. So use the resource wisely and keep them as constraints. So whatever resources you have, you can have them as constraints. You can have limited budget, which is obvious. You can have a limited cost. You can have management reserve in the cost. You can have contingencies. You can have scope. You limit the scope and the request for changes on the scope based on certain criteria you could set for your team and for the people who are going to execute your project, whether the contractor or whoever. Then we go to another pillar which is very important, which is the rules, which actually talking about the governance. When we talk about governance, we're talking about rules and responsibilities. We're talking about relationships between whatever objectives your project is going to fulfill or realize and the strategic objectives of the organization. We're talking about escalation, decision-making process. We're talking about stakeholders relationship, and we're talking about how we monitor the project. So this third pillar also important. In this pillar, you could say who's doing what and what is the governance give, what power do my stakeholders have in a dashboard. So we give you a very holistic view of your project. Then we go to the risks. When you talk about risks, we could adapt the same risk management process mentioned in the BIM book about how you plan the risk, you identify it, you assess it, you do the response planning, and then you monitor and control. And you could add to the risks whatever things that might happen in the future, and you already have planned for them to deal with them. And when it comes to issues, you would use the rules part to overcome the issues you do have. So we capture more or less the projects into 4 main pillars. Now, as a result, we are expecting to have those. We are expecting to have results. We are expecting to have results as outputs or outcomes. So if those are outputs, means that those are deliverables. If those are outcomes, means that those are changes that use those deliverables or the outputs to make a change in your organization or whatever you are trying to do. And eventually, the realization, the last R, which is the realization, addresses basically the benefits, why you want this project to be executed. This could be ROI, return on investment. This could be social impact. What impact are you expecting to happen out of this project? So I'm against the idea that project manager need only to focus on the triple constraint when it comes to cost, scope, and time, and to expand his thoughts and his response to consider the value, the benefit that he's creating out of this project that he's executing. So that is a bridge between program and project management in terms of deliverables and what you want to do. Now, again, going back to the reasons are very important why you launch this project. And people link the reasons with business cases. Not necessarily, you don't have to have a business case, a fully business case, but it depends on the situation, it depends on the nature of the project you are trying to manage or trying to execute. Please bear in mind that every industry has its own personality. So if you are coming from consulting industry, the project management practices you're supposed to use to manage the projects are not the same when it comes to construction, not the same when it comes to oil and gas, not the same when it comes to transportation. Of course, there's some similarity, there's overlap between them, but The benefits are different. The values you're creating are different. The way and the methodologies you're using, maybe from framework is the same, but the details you need to adjust them. So please, please, please don't take the standards of PMI or any standards you've read in the books and try to impose them or force them into your organization, which has different culture and different processes that are integrated with one another. You need to understand the culture, you need to understand the limitation of integrating the processes you have. And again, you need to understand that you have a gap to fill. You have this gap to fill. So in order to fill the gap, you don't want to create problems. You need to understand the culture. You need to understand whether the theory could be applied into practice. You need to understand if the practice is relevant to whatever you are doing. So ask yourself questions about how to bridge this gap, and don't just rush to the conclusion that this gap could be filled automatically using the processes and the standards you just extracted from a certain book or certain experience from someone. So if Ibrahim or someone else just came and share with you, some experience that he had in the past, don't just take this for granted and just trying to apply it to your organization. Think twice and see how you could do this change and this transition. So it's a complete change management plan that you need to do just to adopt these methodologies. Try to make things simple. Try to address them right, and try to put your focus always on the value that you are creating to deliver the projects or the program you're trying to deliver. And when it comes to benefits management or benefits realization, there are a lot of many schools that you could adapt. PMI one of them, so that you could identify those KPIs. You can understand the impact, whether those benefits are economically address benefits, or maybe socially or whatever. You could easily have them measurable, and then you could monitor them from one time to another. And by explaining this model that I've created, my session of sharing with you the knowledge I had, the experience I've just done in the past is concluded. So I think I would like by this I would like to thank you for your attention and your participation in this short webinar that I luckily shared with you my 7 hours project canvas. Thank you so much. If you have any question, please ask the question. Lily, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim. We have heard so many interesting topics and ideas, and thank you especially for sharing the 7R theory of yours. It was also very interesting. So, dear participants, I would like to ask you to raise your questions at the Q&A section, and I am going to forward them to Dr. Ibrahim. So we are going to start with the first question, which was previously asked from Adel Aish. He would like to know if the slides would be available later. This is related to the material.
Yes, of course. I will share the slides with you, and you could share them with the participants, of course.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I'm going to check in the chat section if we have any questions so far, but I encourage all the participants to write their questions in the Q&A part. We have received many thanks, as I have seen so far. I think the presentation was very explicit and detailed. I myself enjoyed it very much. So we are waiting still for the questions. One of the questions, Dr. Sadi Adra, is how do we benefit when they are realized by operations? Why their capabilities are developed by project and programs? So I guess it's what are, like, how can we benefit from when they are realized by operations?
You have to think of the organization as one body. You are an integral part of one organization, an agile organization, supposed to back itself up, making sure that every resource and every individual in this organization doing something. So you need to realize the whole picture. Now we know the famous story about the janitor in NASA when JF Kennedy asked him about what he's doing, and he said, "I'm trying to put a man in the moon." So it's basically understanding the value created by the task or the small task you are trying to do in this organization. That would give you an understanding what benefits you are creating for your organization. So in order to communicate this value, you need to make sure that whatever deliverables you are trying to do is really aligned with the organization's objectives. So it's basically an integration between the organization objectives and the project objectives you're trying to do. Part of the reasons I put the 7 R's, which is basically the reason why you're doing this project. So the reason would tell you how aligned you are with the organization objectives you are trying to fulfill in the long run or in the medium term.
Thank you very much. I'm turning to the next question from Mr. Munir. He would like to know if you have any suggestions for new changes or methodologies to follow.
Out there that you have a lot of experiences and a lot of practices and a lot of theories. And when it comes to different project management disciplines, when it comes to risks management, it comes to stakeholder management and value management, all these disciplines, you would have tons and tons of case studies. What I'm suggesting to you, every one of you, to read case studies, because case studies will give you experience. Case studies will give you lessons learned of whom have applied those learnings and who have ended up having problems and how he or she overcome them when he delivered or she delivered the project. And this is where you build your maturity on how to deliver the project in the right way. Instead of just reading a textbook which tells you that risk management process is this. So don't just ask questions. Challenge everything that you've been given. Don't just take them for granted and then you try to apply them immediately. Think about it. Take a deep breath. Think about what you're trying to apply. I think by doing this, you would give yourself a chance to be innovative, creative. So read more case studies, read more magazines about project managers, talk with people who has experience in project management and program management, portfolio management. Talk with people who failed, because in order to be successful, you need to fail. So talk to them. How did they fail? What have they learned out of their failure? How did they overcome their failures in the future? What processes that they've come up with when it comes to improving the methodologies that they use to develop their project management skills. So you need to do all this so that you can build up your project management skills.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you the next question? Do we still have time for it?
Yeah, go ahead, no problem.
Thank you very much. The next question from Yazid is, what is the most challenging project you have faced and how did you manage these challenges?
That's a very good question. It wasn't a billion real project. It was only maybe 20 or 30 million Saudi riyal project. The biggest challenge is changing organization's objectives. So you are in the middle of a project where you are trying to execute to fulfill the project's objectives that's already aligned with the organization objectives. But all of a sudden, the leadership of the project has changed, or the leadership of the organization has changed, and automatically the strategic objectives of the organization has changed. So that would have a dramatic change that need to be applied to the project that you are trying to execute. So aligning the objective of the project with the organization project and ensuring sustainability of the project throughout its execution life cycle is one of the biggest headache, which needs a lot of focus, and especially when it comes to multiple stakeholders that are in power of stopping you from moving forward. Now, regardless if you have 100,000 stakeholders or 100 stakeholders or 10 stakeholders. The key question is, how many of those stakeholders has the power to interrupt you or to disrupt you from moving ahead in executing your project as planned? How many of those you've communicated well to have them as allies to move ahead with your projects and deliver the benefits you promised to deliver according to the plan you've get their approval on? So you need to make sure that the part which related to the rules, the governance of the project, this part is managed very well so that you can overcome whatever obstacles you might have in the project. So you always have to have plan B, contingencies. You have people who are going to help you and support you in difficult times.
It's very appreciated that you are giving so detailed answers. So on behalf of FASI, I would like to ask you, what is an effective way to define, monitor, and report on the defined benefits in a business case?
There are different business cases are different, right? So when it comes to business cases, we're talking about why would we consider this project in the first place. So if you want to define benefits, let's drill down from the objectives we have. So we need to have a strategy. We need to have objectives. Once we have the objectives, we know exactly that we need to realize certain targets or certain outcomes out of those objectives that we've defined within the strategy. Then after that, we need to know how to measure those benefits. How do we know if we were successful or not? For example, we've built the skyscraper, but the benefits out of the skyscraper is three things. One is to make sure that we have skyscraper in the city, so it's a PR benefit that could be measured throughout the social media, for example, or through the media in general. So we could measure this kind of benefit. Second thing is that the skyscraper is really going to uplift or contribute to the city's ranking across the globe. So this is another thing that this skyscraper is going to contribute in. So you define the benefits based on the objectives you've drilled down out of the organization, and then after that you build a way on how to measure the successful rate on which you're supposed to measure the success of your project based on this benefits you've identified. Then throughout the execution of the program itself or the projects, you are creating values of every time you are executing certain work stream or phase, you know that you are creating a certain value. Now, whatever value you want to create, you want to measure. So if you are using an asset, you want to see the return on assets. If you want to invest some money, you want to know return on investment on certain capital you are investing in. And eventually, after you conclude your project or the program, you need to know that these objectives, at least within the medium term, going to be fulfilled based on the project and the program you've delivered in the first place according to the plan you've set forth.
Thank you very much. Our next question is from Ramzi. It's a very clear question, which is asking, is the technical support part of an IT project fall under project methodology or operation?
Okay, when it comes to support, if we define support as a task to be done to conclude certain phases within a project plan, then the technical support as a function in the organization will play a role in executing a certain work package within this project plan. But when you talk about a technical support, an IT support, just to ensure sustainability of a product or a service that we are producing to our clients, then it comes operational. And there is a debate between between the definitions of the operation and the projects, although it's clearly defined at the BIM book, but others also consider the operation part as a project as well, because not every operation, not every year is unique, because every year has different operation risks, or if I may, or if you will, or risk or environmental factors that's impacting them. So as a function within your organization structure, it either played a role within a specific projects as an executor or as a support, so a task owner, or it could be playing the same role in an operational side within the organization DNA to sustain the operation of a certain product or service.
Thank you very much. The next question is regarding long-term question. What do you think? How big will be hybrid methodology adaptation in the next 10 years? Do you think this will be the future?
I think the future will be different. I think emerging technologies, will take over some of the activities project managers are doing, such as reporting, for example, such as the repetitive work done through machines. We have to distinguish between automation and digitalization, because we are going into digitalization. Digitalization is a holistic view. You could use the AI to communicate even with the client and the suppliers in terms of the whole value chain of the project management. So the only part, which is, I think, I doubt also that it could be overtaken by the AI machines as well, but it could be like an area where you could, for example, excel, which is basically the decision-making process and the innovation process of the project management. The machine or the AI or the emerging technologies, you rely on data so that they can do the machine learning algorithms, so that they can come up with the decisions that they could come, which is going to be logical based on the probabilities that they're going to calculate, and give you the probability of how you're supposed to take decisions based on the data they've collected. But comparing with the human being is skilled when it comes to difficult times when we need to make difficult decisions. So the decision making process and the innovation part of the project, where you already have a plan that move you from this point to that point. Whereas if you are innovative enough and creative enough, you could change the path into a more efficient path to deliver the project in a more efficient way. This is a place where we still yet to go with the machines, but who knows, maybe 20, 30, 40 years from now, we might see something that could overcome this innovation part. We saw machines can draw painting, but again, there's some awareness and some self awareness that the people has, the human being has, that could not be superseded by the machine. Last thing is that the machine could take over easily in anything that needs data and probabilities, like the risk management. So you could build up on the historical data, and you could say the machine could tell you, like R2A2, I think the Star Wars, he asked the machine always about the probability of doing a certain activity. And then who's the risk taker, who's the risk averse, is the human, is the people who's making the decision. So I don't think that the making decision will be superseded by the machines.
Thank you very much. We have 4 questions more. Do we have time for them still?
I have 10 minutes, and then I have to close the session.
Okay, thank you very much. So most probably we try to respond to the 4 remaining questions, and sorry we are not able to get more questions at the moment. But quickly, let's continue with the question of Mr. Ahmed. First of all, he thinks the presentation is very interesting. Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim. The question is, do you think the business analysis is the first step toward bridging the theory with practice to overcome organization, environment, and culture?
Well, yes, it depends on how you define business analysts. If you will go to a certain school defining the business analyst that's connecting the dots of certain businesses using any of the models that we've just mentioned earlier, or business models, all these businesses ideas in my presentation, I think that would give you an idea. See, the key point here is whoever is going to do this to bridge this gap, he needs to have some idea and especially screening the organization from its pros and cons, understanding the weaknesses, the SWOT of the organization, how is its maturity level look like, how its people look like, how its tools look like, how its processes look like, and so forth. If you've analyzed all this as a business analyst, of course, you are the starting point of how the gap supposed to be bridged between practice and theory, because the gap going to be identified by the business analyst.
Thank you. The next question is from Mr. Munir. The question is, Do you think that it is related to PM authority and role, and maybe sometimes we demand to PM just to success on three constraints? Maybe organizations should just change to focus on this.
Okay,
So,
going back to the model that I've just introduced, which is the 7 R's. Well, if we focus on the rules and the governance, okay, and the adaption of the constraints, I think every organization is different. When you talk about consulting organization, compared to consulting organizations, basically is a projectized organization. They work based on the request that they've received, and then they allocate resources and time sheets and so forth, so that they can fulfill that. So you need to be careful when it comes to defining the constraints for each of those disciplines when you want to execute any of those projects. Don't generalize. Constraints when it comes to cost and scope and time, those are obvious, those are logical. But sometimes you could jeopardize the time just for the sake of satisfying the stakeholders and to fulfill certain values of the project that you're trying to deliver. So be resilient, be agile. When you become agile enough, you would know that these constraints are not, let's just say, steel walls. Those are rubber walls. You could stretch them. You could have them elastic. You could have them worked around in order to capture or acquire new businesses. See, sometimes you want the project to be ended in 2 months time frame, just for the sake of and originally planned for, like, I don't know, maybe 3 months. So you're rushing up just to secure another business. So there are many other aspects that's really determine how you want the project to be constrained. So don't just get linear and you think just only these triple constraints supposed to be considered when you manage the project. And of course, the organization need to adapt this, need to change, need to be agile enough to understand the benefits that you want to create, to increase and impose more engagement from the people who's involved in this project that to be executed.
thank you. The next question is from Dr. Amina. She's asking, how did you see the faking on crime of CSIS profile of provider?
Well, I'm not familiar with this incident fully, but I could say that you could do whatever precautions if you applied the risk management process to really manage what could happen and what could not happen. And you could also run a very good statistical analysis using probability of success and probability of failure, probability of threats to be happening. So I think if we use this and employ this kind of knowledge, we could easily predict and forecast what could happen next, and we could be ready to for any of these incidents. I'm not quite familiar with this incident, but she could enlighten me more.
Thank you very much for considering all the questions. We have only one more question for today, then we need to close this session. The last question is from Mr. Mohammed. He is asking, from the 7R techniques, what is the connection between outcome and realization? Why outcome not part of realization, as it came up with the benefit of the project?
That is a very excellent question. There is a debate about the segregation between what outcomes are and what benefits are. Some people consider them one. Some people define them differently. For instance, you might have benefits that you want to realize, but those were not outcomes that happened to be as a result of the projects that you've executed. For example, when you build the tracks for trains, let's just say these are trains, right? So when you build the tracks for the trains, when you build those called tracks, right? You would help transporting goods or people from one point to another point. So the outcome here is to, for example, maybe in this case, Maybe return on investment. Maybe I want to increase the number of goods I'm transporting from point A to point B so that I can have more revenue or I can have more traffic of the supply chain. However, when you've done this, many small businesses have been created surrounding this transportation you've done. For example, you might have stations that help maintaining the tracks. So if you created businesses, this is one of the benefits you want to realize, but not necessarily an outcome of the project or a program you're trying to execute. They might have some social aspect of the benefits that's not measurable out of the project that you're trying to create or the program you're trying to create. But it comes with the package that it's going to be created for the population sitting in this area. Same thing applies to the passenger. If you want to, if you create a transportation tracks between A and B, let's just say that, and you create that to transport passengers. The outcome of the projects basically is to save time, having them protected while they are in the cars, to transport them from point A and B. But the benefits, maybe we've minimized the number of car accidents on the roads. So that is why in my model, I said there are many, there are something to be realized, a measurement that you need to put in place to see what advantages could have come as a result of an outcome that's been received from this program that you are executing. So maybe you have a board of stakeholders that's really happy for this project to be executed because you minimize the number of deaths on the streets because of the tracks and the trains, cars you've just put on the tracks. So I'm giving you just a glimpse of how I think about realizations of benefits and what benefits look like. And of course, there's a realization of objectives if we are talking about objectives related to a certain organization or the nation by itself.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Ibrahim Shera. It was a very wide, very explicit, and very interesting presentation. Thank you for taking the extra time to responding all and each question from all the participants and who raised questions. They are very, very thankful. So this was for today, our very, very interesting webinar. You are going to receive information related to the PDUs that you can claim. And please, if you have any interest in joining to our chapter, to PME KSA as volunteering, or if you have any interest in the upcoming events like the Project Management Awards upcoming in February, please visit our webpage, which is pmiksa.sa. Thank you very much for everybody again for joining. We are going to close the meeting. Thank you very much for this very explicit presentation, Dr. Ibrahim. Have a nice evening. Goodbye.